All right, if it's Tuesday, it could mean only one thing. It's time, Mike, for a giant bag of Tootsie Pops, which I believe you had left in the green room for me in case I got hungry and needed some nourishment. And I needed some, Mike, because I had some technical difficulties getting on tonight. Uh-oh, Mike, you're muted.
Oh, am I unmuted now?
Now you're unmuted.
Okay, well, there you go. You're welcome for the pops.
Yeah, I needed some sugar, and Mike knows that I like the chocolate flavor the best of the Tootsie Pops. I'm not a big Tootsie Pop fan, but, any port in a storm. Mike, I have had nothing but technical difficulties tonight. We have a big guest on tonight, Paul Jenkins. We are super excited to have him. And, of course, that's the night that nothing goes right. I'm literally on my second computer. I have a backup laptop.
Oh, so you couldn't even use the new one.
Couldn't even use the new one. So Gatilla doesn't like Tootsie Pops? I mean, what's up?
No, Tootsie Pops from the bastards who made Tootsie Rolls are awesome.
Yeah, I don't know what you left in the green room for Paul Jenkins, but thank you for the Tootsie Pops, Mike. And speaking of Paul Jenkins, I mean, I figure at very least we should bring him onto the show at some point. He's just sitting there by himself. Let's welcome to our show, Paul Jenkins. Welcome to the show.
You guys.
Paul, I would love to say that we're not usually this disorganized, but the audience would tell you we're always this disorganized.
It's in consolation. I'm far less organized than you guys are, so this is a wake-up call for me.
It's not bad, Mike. You left me the Tootsie Pops. What did you put in the green room for Paul?
What did I put in the green room?
Oh, what did he leave for you in the green room? Sometimes Mike will just leave random stuff.
Some basically fried sprats from Bosnia.
Yeah.
What?
Fried sprats. I got them from the international store.
What's a sprat?
You don't need to worry about what a sprat is.
Yeah, it's like a little fish. It's like the little fish that you don't eat, but
but you eat them.
So we do.
These are much better, Paul. These are much better.
No. Fried sprats are the thing. So we'll be having a taste test later.
Yeah, wow. You got to pop them open.
Hey, Paul, we've got an exciting show. People are already, you saw probably the questions were already flying in. Even before the show started, they were asking us, well, yes, I was impunctual. Is impunctual the correct conjugation of that?
That is not a word.
How would we conjugate that? Could not.
Hey, if you were writing comics, that could be a word. And
that
if it wasn't,
it would
be a sound effect.
Yeah, Paul would know. He's gonna give me a pass. The little fish you don't eat, but you eat them.
The little fish that you don't eat, but then you eat them.
So, Mike, let's get started with the right stuff, Mike. People who know us, can you see that, Mike? Can you see that?
I can see the Paul Jenkins thing. You want
to? All right, and then did you see it switch slides?
No,
it didn't slide.
No. Oh boy.
More
technical difficulties. There you go.
Hold on. Very sorry, Paul. This is just like us to not get it right.
This is what happens when you don't take a nap.
Yeah, I didn't take a nap. Can you see the robot chicken, Mike?
Yes, can see that.
Good. All right, I can't do my usual 2-screen thing, Paul. So everybody knows Mike Fasolo. He is a well-known TV writer, 2-time Emmy Award, 3-time Emmys. Mike's the real deal. I'm Buddy Scalera, and that's it. I guess that was pretty much it. I'm Buddy Scalera. I write the comic books too. But really, we are here because we have a legendary comic book writer, one of my favorites. Everybody, please welcome Paul Jenkins. Now, Paul, I had to really look far and wide to find a picture of a Wizard Fan Award. Mike and I, as we noted, and we'll tell a little bit of the history of it, Mike and I worked at Wizard when you were pulling off Sentry. I don't have, Mike, do you have a picture of a Wizard Fan Award?
I do not have a picture of a fan award, but I do know that Paul has won 5 of them.
Yeah, I have one of them. Would you like to see it?
Yeah, does it cheapen it after 3 and 4, or is it still just as exciting every time?
No, I would really love to show you my Wizard Fan Award. I think you guys will get a kick out of it.
Yeah, do it, man.
This is my cat, Claudius, sitting
Was
there.
That the award? You got
you got a cat?
So this is the award. Hang on, it needs a bit of an introduction. Yeah, it didn't last very long.
Oh no! You just got the feet.
Yeah.
What was
And
the
now
rest of it?
What did you win? What was the award that you won for that one that you?
This one is favorite one shot or miniseries, Wolverine Origin.
Now, Paul, did Wizard send it to you that way, and did you go and be like, "I'd like a replacement," and then we just, as a company, skipped it?
I remember being at the Wizard Fan Awards that year, and so I had just done what I normally do. I had just literally had an extensive knee injury, and I was on crutches, and I was really injured. Like that injury was like a crazy bad injury, and I had put my leg outside my body, which wasn't pleasant. It was very ugly, and I can bring that up as a screen share, but you guys will never have another audience again. It's really bad.
Our audience would probably love it.
They would love it.
Yeah, it's really gruesome, right? And I've got pictures of it because I always do, right? So I'm kind of getting up on stage and sort of going, and eventually, we won 5 of these, and I think Marvel got possession of them. And so they sent me my one, and it was in like lots of pieces in the packaging, and that's what it looked like. And I thought, in all honesty, it was so funny that I wanted to keep my Wizard Fan Award looking like this forever.
Just
So
like
I never glued it back together.
As you should have.
Yeah. Well, the award lasted longer than Wizard, Paul. So
yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, it's still going. Yeah.
Mike and I had to move on to other jobs, but
you already got some comments coming in. Questions.
Oh, look at this! They already have questions, Mike. You're gonna entertain questions, Mike?
I do everything.
Do it, Mike. Go.
I would actually ask about Witchblade and why that run was cut short. Paul was really doing something interesting with Sarah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I have always marched to the beat of my own drum in this business. That's just the way I've been. I didn't want to do Witchblade at first for very specific reasons, right? Nothing to do, and I want to make this really clear, right? It has nothing to do ever with me trying to be a crusader for something, right? I am a crusader for things like, charities or any of that kind of stuff through writing good stories, I hope, right? And so it was a purely story thing of, I didn't want to write Witchblade where she was running around in a silver catsuit. I was not interested in it. I didn't think it meant anything. And so I pitched to them. They asked me for a couple of years if I would do it. And I basically said I didn't want to do it. No, I wasn't interested. Although I really like Matt Matt Hawkins, who was there, and I really like Mark. And eventually I agreed to do it if they would let me write a story of a young, attractive woman who worked in the New York Police Department as a detective, because that in and of itself was a really interesting story about all the stuff she'd have to deal with and all that. And so I insisted that she was just as sexy. If you wanted the sexy stuff, it was just as good in t-shirt and jeans. And she really was. And what do you think they ended up making into the TV show? Her in the t-shirt. That's what they made into the show.
Into the show.
Yeah. And so I did it for a certain amount of time. I think that we did some pretty incredible stories. I actually did one with my dearly departed friend, Michael Zulli, who I knew from the Ninja Turtles. He passed away this last year. And we did one about where she was an actual witch, and she came in to right the wrong of some child abuse. And she came in as a witch, as like a kind of an avenging witch. And it was so unique and so interesting. But at a certain point, they began to kind of draw silver catsuit stuff back into the book. And I was like, I'm not there for it, because it doesn't work for the story that I try to tell. And because I'm that idiot, I'm sort of like, I don't really want to do this anymore.
Paul, Mike and I talk about this. If we were somehow accidentally invited to write a comic book, but we knew that we couldn't do anything with it, we would probably turn it down. If I got the opportunity, and I know Nick and Nick Barucci and Joe Ryban, and they said, would you like to write Vampirella? I'd have to go like, I don't know what I would say. Do you ever have to turn anything down where, like Witchblade, you were allowed to make enough of a modification that it was palatable? Do you ever have to just turn something around and you go like, I just can't do anything with Scooby-Doo and the gang?
I turned down Spider-Man for about 3 years, maybe 2.5, 3 years before I did it.
And yet you have a fantastic run in one of the definitive issues of Peter Parker, and What you had to wait until the muse came around? And
No, it was that I came into Marvel. I was having some success with Inhumans, and now we're doing Sentry. And I had known Ralph Macchio because he was involved in Werewolf by Night, which I'd done for them, and they had let me write some stories that were interesting. But the Strange Tales line hadn't really taken found its audience. And so Ralph asked me, would I be interested in writing Spider-Man? And I said, Ralph, the problem that I have is also my superpower is also my problem, right? I don't know very much about comics, and I certainly didn't then. And I cared about writing only the content, not really necessarily could I refer to something that happened in issue 233 of Daredevil. I didn't know any of that history stuff. And so I said, look, Ralph, my feeling is that it's kind of boring to me. And I don't know if I can offer anything because I don't know what the Clone Saga is and you can't explain it to me. And everything's covered, right? There's all this stuff that Peter Parker has done and I don't know how to describe any of it. And right now, it's just confusing to me. And then even after that, I think they killed his wife, Mary Jane, in a plane crash. And so it became part of my college lecture as to why I wouldn't do Spider-Man. And then one day I had the idea of how I could understand Spider-Man. So the way that I did it was that I took over. I wrote 3 issues of Web Spinners. I did 2 with Sean Phillips and 1 with J.G. Jones. The 2 I did with Sean were about him going back and facing his original foe, which is the Chameleon. Again, I don't really know these characters, but I just learned that was his first foe, And so I wanted to write about how he makes a mistake, how it all falls down. And spoiler alert, the Chameleon just comes back not because he doesn't know who he is as a human. He's everybody and he doesn't know how to be a person. And the most interesting person he knows is Spider-Man. So he wants to be like him. He wants to just be Peter Parker. He doesn't care about Spider-Man. He wants to be Peter Parker with a lovely aunt who makes bad meatloaf and all that stuff, right? And so we wrote that issue, but the whole point was to write the 3rd one, which is Peter Parker wakes from this terrible dream after this really bad experience. And in the dream, he dreams of being trapped by all the continuity that's ever happened in Spider-Man, all the tragedies, they were losing their luster. So he's trapped literally by comic book panels, and he has to kind of work his way through them and release himself from the death of Captain Stacy and all of this Clone Saga. And the pieces peel off. And at the end of the story, it's basically him. And the only people left are Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin and the Vulture, and this is where he wants to be, and he's happy, and he's back to where he should be, which is the simplicity of the character. And they disappear, and then the last person walks out onto this rooftop, and it's Gwen, who I think he always loved, and he says, "I want to be with you," and she's like, "You can't. You're dreaming. You have to wake up."
Oh.
And the moment I'd written that.
that's even just telling it. I'm like,
Mike,
this
is why he's who he is, and we're who we are.
Exactly.
This is the problem. All right, so look, let's just Mike do the proper intro, because for those who are joining who kind of sort of know who Paul Jenkins is, Mike, give them your deep in-depth research. Don't live out a minute of it.
My deep in-depth research. Yes, he is a prolific comic writer.
Yes.
Prolific.
Yes.
I can give you a list of all the stuff he's done, and this is just a few of the things. He's done a lot more. Hellblazer, big one. Werewolf by Night.
Now, Paul, is it like the law? If you're a British writer and you come to America, like it's the law, you have to write Hellblazer?
It's possible, but one of the things that people don't remember and really didn't understand is that I didn't come out of British comics, right?
Yeah.
I didn't come out 2000 AD. I had never written 2000 AD.
But they heard the accent and they go, "It's the law."
That's right. So basically, what you do is you show up at a comic convention with a British accent and a leather jacket, and you vomit on someone's shoes, and then yell at them and throw a punch, and then they're like, "You're hired.
You're on Hellboy," and you're like,
"We're gonna have to try that one."
All right, so go ahead, Mike. Keep going.
So Hellblazer, 40+ issue run on that one. Werewolf by Night. Inhumans, which he won an Eisner Award with Jay Lee for. The Sentry, created the character. The Incredible Hulk, 20-issue psychological dive into Bruce Banner's personas. That sounds good. I haven't read that one yet, but I definitely would like to. Then the Spider-Man one that you mentioned, Wolverine Origin, which we go back into Wolverine's childhood, Civil War Front Lines, Mythos, that was a Marvel one-shot. Then there was a few others, Revelations from Dark Horse, Sidekick from Image. It was the creator-owned series. The Agency, Top Cow, and Alters were from Aftershock, which was, I guess, around 2018.
Yeah. You left out one of my favorites from Marvel. I think the favorite work that I ever did, and I think it's the best work I ever did for Marvel, was Captain America: Theater of War. I think
that was not on your list.
Yeah, those are like those are ones that are like a love letter to the American military. And so people will kind of go, well, why? You're a Brit, right? Yeah, but I come from a military family, and it's not like I don't understand the plight of the common soldier. And so one thing that I might mention, because if I'm going to slap myself on the back, it's worth saying, Chris Evans apparently spent his entire 3 or 4 movies walking around with one copy of one comic book that was Mythos Captain America. And he said quite famously that it was the epitome of the American soldier. This was the heart of Captain America. I believe him. I agree with him. I think the story that we wrote for Mythos was, and we'll get into this in talking about writing, the fundamental thing that I think, I don't know if it sets me apart, but it's the thing that I do, which is to find the why. Why is there a point to this? And so in Mythos, the premise was that, if anyone's familiar with the origin of Captain America, you're probably more familiar than I am, right? But if you think about it, he starts and he's on the steps, right, in this origin story, and he's reading a comic book, and there's a bully with like a catapult, like bullying him in the street as he's trying to read a comic. And, and so the premise that I put forward is that he would have been born before the war, right? So he's born during the Depression. And one of the things that happens is he doesn't know his dad. His dad dies, right? So he's raised by a single mother. And the premise that I put forward is that he goes to enlist with the same kid that was bullying him, this kid called Doug Huggins. And when he goes to enlist, Doug goes because he's bored, and he goes because he really wants to enlist. But his whole reason for enlisting is so that he can be in the Blue Spaders, the 17th Infantry, so he can be in his father's regiment, because he never knew his father. And so once you get that connection to why someone would want to serve their country, why they care about it, why they have this love for their country, because America can tend at its worst to be kind of really jingoistic. But I have many very close friends who are in the American military who are incredible patriots, right? And so he goes to enlist, he becomes Captain America. Now he ends up going to war with Doug Huggins in the same regiment, the Blue Spaders, and they go to Sicily, and then he ends up pinning the Medal of Valor to that same guy. And at the very end of the book, spoiler alert, he's with Doug, and they're at the regimental dinner, and all the old boys are there. And of course, he's a young man, and now he's feeding Doug at the table, and all the old boys fade out, and it's just him and Doug. And he says,
another chill, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Now I got to go and read all these. These are things I got to look up and find now.
Right. You got to go find this stuff. You got to find Mythos, right? Because I think what we did with Mythos, they're probably some of the hardest books I've ever written, but they were some of the most rewarding. And from Captain America, I will tell you this. I'm not going to keep doing spoilers all night, but I will tell you that when I got a phone call from Tom Brevoort, and he said, Paul, I know the answer to this, but do you want to write some Captain America? We've got this project called Theater of War, and they're oversized 35-page issues. And I said, yeah, I want to make some pitches. And I called him back about half an hour later with 4, and we did all 4 of them. And the first one that I pitched to him, I told him the story. I did it like we're talking, and I told it to him. And as I finished the story, the last page, Tom let out a little involuntary laugh. And I said, I know what you're doing, Tom. You're trying not to cry, aren't you? And he went, he said, you bastard.
Yeah, to turn his camera, the little tears just slide down his cheek.
Yeah. So in the end, and one of the things that I think will really move people is that, I wrote about Doug Huggins being this character, but Doug Huggins was my next door neighbor. He was on the USS St. Louis when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and his best friend Bobby Shaw was killed on the Arizona. And I interviewed Doug. I have him on film. But what's so great is I actually got to do a picture of Doug and also of Bobby, right? And so one of the main characters in one of the things was Bobby Shaw as well. Another main character was one of my best friends, a guy called Brian Anderson, who's a triple amputee. He was the first triple amputee to survive his wounds in Iraq. So I got to do real core stuff. And I think that's why Chris Evans kind of saw that as being, I'm not really fond too much of reviews because it doesn't matter if someone doesn't like something of mine. Genuinely, to me, it's okay. I'm fine with it. And it's also hard to get too much praise, because I think it's just like, it's subjective, right? But I will say that series gave me my favorite review ever, which was a Marine veteran who had PTSD, who wrote in to say that it took a British writer and an Italian artist to teach him the true meaning of American patriotism.
See, there you go. The tears just keep.
Let's do that. All right, so let's get into it, because there's a whole bunch of people who are very interested in what we've put together, Paul. And I will note, Mike, it's a little hard I can't do the usual Zoom effect. That Spider-Man issue as a standalone issue. Paul, I will put in air quotes, nothing happens, at least in the traditional Spider-Man universe. But it stands as probably one of the best standalone issues. It'll give you the feels.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Paul. Let's jump right over here. So we might not get through both of these tonight, which will give us an excuse to invite you back, Paul.
Okay.
The idea here is that you put together two incredible first issues and then plotted just brilliant runs for both of these stories. Now, you shared with us some of the pitches, and I literally have some screenshots of your script. The Inhumans, this is the breakdown. It was 22, and we still did 22 pages. Again, it's, as you noted, it's done by Jay Lee. You guys collaborated on some wonderful work. I think the overview of this, even as we look at it, you noted in the beginning you were going for a mood. Lest I talk too much, it's in the pitch, but do you want to just describe briefly what mood you were going for when you were pitching it to Jay to make sure it was visualized the right way?
Yeah. So I think the thing to understand is that I think we did one of the questions that comes up. There are two questions that come up quite a lot, right? One of them is why is it that British writers have this sort of ability? And I'll tell you something that's not true. Okay, British writers are no more intelligent or no better writers, right, than American writers. That's obviously the case, right? There are plenty of great American writers. There are plenty of great British writers. But as a whole, certainly a lot of British writers have found their way into it. And that's because we don't necessarily grow up with a massive reverence for American comic books in the way that American writers do, right? We're not dying to write Spider-Man, as you can tell. We're not dying to write Batman. I think it's kind of cool, but I want to write great stories. And so by the time we wind our way around to them, we're much more story focused and we're a little bit less fearful of like not delivering with Batman punching the Joker really hard or something. I don't need that in my books to make it work. So when I devised Inhumans, I think there was a choice that Jay and I made, certainly a choice that I made, that I think set it apart. Because if you look at the history of the Inhumans, it was very unpopular up to the time that we did it. In fact, they couldn't give that book away. They kept trying to do the Inhumans. It never worked as its own series. And I can tell you why, because I'm annoying like that. And after we did it, it hasn't really been popular since. They've used them, sure, but they haven't been able to make it stick like we did with the Inhumans miniseries.
All right. So why didn't it work? You just set up.
Okay. So here's the thing, right? The core fundamental thing that I noticed with Black Bolt was that he couldn't speak.
Yeah.
Right. That was really important to the character. And if he speaks, then his voice is so resonant that stuff blows up. So there's a great opportunity for having the world crack in half, or breaking Galactus's helmet or something because Black Bolt speaks. And that's great and all, but it kills the character. He's not supposed to speak. And so our tone was intentionally quiet in that first issue. It was supposed to be. It was very reserved and it was very quiet. If you look at the top left of that screen, you can see the quiet kind of approach of just moving into Black Bolt, and it says, something along the lines of, imagine that you could never speak, not one single word. What would you say, right? And it goes through this whole thing of in this first issue of kind of showing him observing his people. He's part of a rowdy family. He's got this whole thing. The whole weight of Atalan is on his shoulders, and he carries that weight, but he cannot speak. Now, I thought this was a metaphor for America. Like everything I did in Inhumans was very much a metaphor for the melting pot that is America. And so, he's got this crazy brother, but he doesn't speak. He witnesses this whole incredible city in this first issue. He goes in and out, all of the ups and the downs and the people and the diversity. It's this incredible melting pot. And then there's this scene, that you're actually on right now with Medusa was really important because she was a very, very important character in the book. And that scene right there is basically her talking to her handmaiden. There's one where she talks and, she's tying her own hair at night, getting ready for bed. So she's using her own hair. And she's talking about her love for her husband, but her fear that her husband can never kind of tell her that he loves her. So I think we grounded it in any person reading it could understand these feelings, but that Black Bolt went about his entire thing with all the palace intrigue. You can see it right there. There's all this like people around and the intrigue of the palace and all this stuff that's happening, big events that are always in the lives of them, but he never speaks. Why did we succeed? Because he goes 12 issues in that thing and we never had him speak.
Yeah, and that's
I'll
where
look at all the other ones. Every single other one that I see, he the writer or whatever the team wants to have something explode visually, so they break the character, in my opinion, by having him speak.
Well, and here's the thing, Paul, that I think always blew me away, and we'll go back to this. Mike, where am I on Zoom right now?
You are very, very small. You got to zoom
very
in.
Small. Okay, let's get bigger. All right.
There you go.
All right.
Couple of more.
Okay, couple of more. But well, we did this. So let's jump over to Sentry because then I can maybe zoom back to, what do you suppose, 300, Mike? Let's see.
Yeah, 300. We got a question coming in.
All right, do the question as I try to figure out how to get the thing.
Is there any possibility that you could do another Sentry comic book?
Yeah, I would say sure.
Yes.
I worked on the Thunderbolts film, and I've been certainly closer to Marvel again. It's been years since I worked for Marvel, right? And I have so many things that I do across so many different media, in film and animation and in comics, television, video games and stuff like that. That I haven't really done corporate creativity for quite some time. But I will say, obviously, that I worked with the film people a little bit on Thunderbolts and especially the Sentry. And so, yeah, I certainly would say it's a possibility, sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, you just made someone happy.
Yes.
So, all right. So we look at the Sentry, Mike. You're going to have to call it out. So we have the Sentry, which I don't think we'll be able to get to tonight, and I'd like my computer to work properly. But once again, Paul starts out with an amazing conceit. I would say you had to establish a character where Black Bolt was an established character, but I would say that you ended with a gut punch. And probably won't get to that tonight because I really want to dig into the Inhumans with you, Paul. So you were kind enough to give us the actual setup and script and the theme. And this is what you laid out, which I think was amazing. And also, you even had a soundtrack in mind.
Yeah, always. I would always work with a soundtrack, especially in Inhumans. It has this entire soundtrack. Yeah.
Well, and talk to us about, you have a real conversation with Jay, and then you go ahead and you have a real conversation on the page.
Yeah.
You're not phoning it in. I mean, this is like you're into it.
Yeah,
and it shows on the page.
Yeah, I don't write like, so I used to be Alan Moore's editor. I was Alan Moore's editor on Big Numbers. I was Alan Moore's editor on From Hell. I used to get his scripts at Tundra, and they are massive. They're really hard to read. And I would imagine, I know Bill Sienkiewicz pretty well, and I know that Bill was really struggling with just the sheer weight of these scripts because there was so much in them, right? Mine is different. As you can see up on screen there, I would write kind of a chatty letter to the artist, and what's the first thing that I would do in working in comics? I would call them up. I would call Jay and say, hey man, what do you want to draw? I'm not even kidding.
Wait, hold on, because that's a good Paul quote. Hold on. Paul, what would the first thing that you would do be?
I'll call the artist and ask them what do they want to draw. And the reason is that I have a thing that I've sort of developed over years. It's part of the way that my company does business, Meta Studios, right? That we believe in a thing called creative adaptability. Like, I'm not afraid to pivot immediately and go and make the thing that because I have a lot of confidence in the way that I make things. I know I can reach somebody's heart. I know I can reach somebody's emotions. And my job as a writer is to kind of engineer their emotions remotely. Yeah. So I know that if I call Jay and I say, Jay, what excites you? Remember, it takes me X amount of time to write a page. It takes him an entire day, or in Jay's case, an entire year to draw a page. Right? It takes a long time for the artist. So I want them to feel like they have ownership, collaboration. And by the way, this is a collaborative medium. So the idea that writers and artists don't collaborate on the way this stuff is all put together is weird to me and frankly counterproductive. I'm not afraid. Look, imagine that this is a movie. I see myself as the writer and co-director, and I see Jay as the director of photography and co-director of the little movie that we're putting together, right? And so call Jay, find out what he likes, explain to him my ideas. It works different with different artists. Mark Buckingham works differently from Ramon Bucks, who works differently from Jay Lee, who works differently from Sean Phillips, right? And so once I've sort of established some of the way that Jay feels about it, and we've talked it through, hey, Jay, I have this opinion about Black Bolt. Do you share that opinion? Okay, let's talk it through. Let's see what we've got. And at that point, I kind of know what story I want to do anyway, but I'm able to tailor it a little bit because it takes them all day to draw it. So they better be spending all day having something to draw that they want to draw. Jay used to say to me all the time, I hate backgrounds and I really hate hands and horses. So I used to write as a joke, I would write like, where's Waldo's scripts? Or I'd write like, and now a battalion of horses comes in, and he'd like, you bastard.
Close up on the hands. And
yeah, there's a hand in our foreground.
There's a hand on a horse. So
no, but I used to just like entertain them, because I used to write a little letter and say, hey, this is what I do. In this particular instance, I think I can see that I had been listening to Songs of Distant Earth. Songs of Distant Earth, if you hear it, it's very haunting. It has a lot of stuff that's quite ethereal, because you can actually hear the original moon landings as part of the recording on the songs, but the music itself kind of gets really put together nicely by Mike Oldfield. And so I said, hey, this is what I'm listening to right now. This is what the feeling and the atmosphere of why I wrote this issue. So if you want to listen to it, please be my guest. If not, you don't have to, of course, right? But this is how I feel as I'm writing this, because I'm hoping that feeling, my job is to create emotion. It's not to like get some punch or some kick or to make sure Green Goblin's in the story. My job is to make the readers feel something. Yeah.
And that's where as you go through this, and Mike and I had the privilege of reading through these pitches, and the scripts are very, how would you describe it, Mike? Like,
it's basically all centered on the characters, which gets you right into their head to find out, how they're thinking and what they're thinking about. Yeah. And it sucks you right in. Like I said, when Buddy's like, hey, check out these comics. I hadn't read either Inhumans or Sentry before. So I picked them up and I'm like, okay, I'll read, one issue and see what's happening. Next thing you know, 3 hours is going by and I'm like 6 issues into Sentry. And I'm like, this is good stuff. And you just want to keep going to find out what's going to happen with them.
Well, that's my job, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but you do it well.
And the emotional charge, the gut punch, and let's get to the gut punch because I love a good gut punch, Paul. You set this up, and this is page 1 and your script. Can you just take us through this, like how you broke down these panels? We managed to get the entire script on the screen here.
Yeah. So essentially, I'm trying to give the pieces. I'm not dictating to an artist ever. I'm not going to dictate to them, but I'm not going to say what the angle is unless I really feel that I'm supposed to. A good example of that would be, like, I often, I have done a bunch of voice directing. I do everything, right? And what you do with an actor is you want the actor to give you the piece, right? You want them to bring the piece of themselves that they have. You can do that from directing in film. You can do it directing in voice directing. But on occasion, you're just not getting what you need. And so I'll often just say to a voice actor, hey, listen, would you mind if I gave you an inflection? Right. And they so appreciate it because they're like, yeah, of course, because I have a great relationship with most of the people I work with creatively. So then I can say, hey, I think the inflection's like this. And they go, great. I understand what you mean now, but I'll never make them do that kind of thing. So if you go back to the script that we have up, what I'm saying, if you look at it, I'm just saying, look, we close in on dot in the sky, it's Black Bolt. So ultimately we've got I said, for example, we catch the tops of some impressive buildings and the side of, but Jay framed that out. The whole point is we need a single flying dot. Jay decided to go below him, right? And that to me is just fine. One of the things that I will say is that when I see that come back and it doesn't have the building or it's a bit different, one of the things that I do that I'm not sure other writers do as much is that I will go back and read dialogue once I see the art. Because the art can kind of change a little bit of the way that the captions work and the dialogue work. An artist can do an incredible rendering, but perhaps that expression on that actor, which is the character, is just a little bit different from what I intended, and the dialogue doesn't quite work in a way. So I'll just go back and rework it. I'm not afraid of that, right? To make it read the best. So if you see it, we're going in, he flies by the power of his mind, he swoops along with his arms out for no reason that I can imagine. Anyway, and then, we close in, but we can see his body in his panel, he's swooping along so serenely. He only has one single expression, which is, for the first 21 pages of this book, he's enigmatic, he's a Mona Lisa, I'm just kind of trying to chat to them and say, this is the things that I think is happening, because where are they actually picking it up? They're picking it up just like they do in a film script. They're picking it up from the dialogue. Right.
Well, but it was brilliant here in panel 2. I mean, you're literally I'm saying you're breaking the fourth wall. You're not really breaking the fourth wall. You're talking to Jay, but I like swooping anyway. So there you have it. Nice one, Jack and Stan.
Right. Make it a smile.
Yeah, there was something charming about it, and the words, he's swooping along so serenely. I mean, you're giving him just enough, but not too much. But
right.
Here you set this fuse, Paul, and this is where this is. Woo!
That's the key. That's the key, buddy. Right? That's the key. Not too much, just enough. Give him what it is. When you see a screenplay, a film screenplay, you have to work very hard as a writer to make sure that you can't direct from the page, right? You can never direct from the page. You have to give them the pieces that allow them to understand it. And so most of it is dialogue. Jay can get what I need from reading this once, and he's going to break it down anyway. It's going to be, but you know what he will know? He'll know what it feels like because of the dialogue. Imagine you could never make another sound for the rest of your life, not a sigh, not yawn. Imagine you were given one chance to speak. What would you say? And this goes back to a way that I write comics, right? I try to make each page its own story. So you can pick up any page of any comic that I write, and it will have a story in and of itself. Do you know who I share that with and where I learned it from? Alan Moore.
He's okay.
Yeah. He's done a few things.
Now, Paul, but I think the genius of this page is what you said, which is it's a mini story, and you created the imperative for the page turn, and you set the fuse on the question, what would you say? Yeah. And in the back of my mind, as I'm reading this throughout, I'm thinking, well, what would I say? So we jump now and we go through this narrative. Now, I would ordinarily zoom in And then we're going to go into the last 2 pages, Paul. So you can see here on the left side, pages 21 and 22. So we'll dive into the script. Do you want to just set up, because I can't zoom, what happens here?
Yeah, essentially, what's happening in the issue is that Black Bolt's going around his town, and he. Okay, so here's a thing to understand. One of the things that's interesting about the narrative. Imagine that you could blah blah blah. What would you say? It's not breaking the fourth wall, but it is speaking in second person. That's a really unusual style of writing. I did it in the Sentry. I did it in Inhumans for Black Bolt. So if you go to the Sentry, actually, and you can see it in the book, it says. You believe this, you remember those days, Bob, why? Because in both cases, it was like their conscience. It was like literally their Jiminy Cricket that was on their shoulder that was saying, hey, you're going to do this, Black Bolt, you're going to do that. What are you thinking, Black Bolt? Next thing, one of the things that's the best way of telling a story, in my opinion, is not to give the answers, but to ask the questions. When people leave a movie and they are asking questions about what just happened, that's awesome, because when you just hand it all to them, and I think that's a detriment of many, many comics, is that they just kind of give you the answer and they go, this is what happened. And you go, great, Batman punched the Joker really hard and the Joker fell over. That's not interesting. But asking questions, moral dilemmas, things that are enigmas, moral ambiguity, right? Those are interesting things to me, and I find them to be, things that are worth doing. So that's what happens in that first page. Imagine that you could never speak. What would you say? Now he goes on this journey. He goes around Atalan, and he's basically looking around, and he's observing his own kingdom. He's watching the family squabbling at dinner. He's going and sitting and listening to his crazy brother Maximus, who he has a real problem with that. And Maximus is mental, and what's he supposed to do? Maximus is taunting him and yelling at him and basically having a go at him and saying, "Listen, we both know that you're full of it, Black Bolt." And Black Bolt says nothing because he cannot speak. Now you go to see how Medusa's really struggling with, that she loves him very much and she knows her role as a head of state. But she can never get her husband to, because if he speaks and says, "I love you," he'll break the world. Yeah. And he goes around this entire thing. You see these images of just the complexity of living inside this world, right? There's all these arguments like Gorgon is mental, and he's arguing, and the Triton is really like I think Triton was one of my favorite characters. Karnak is very reserved, and there's actually something that I did with Karnak. And we did something with Karnak that I think was very unique. If you see, I don't know if you can zoom in at all, but I think if you can just see how we present Karnak in this issue, he's right down, there. He's the second one from the right. Karnak has these great tattoos on his face, and he in his, I didn't know anything about the characters. So they sent me a couple of 5-page stories by Jack Kirby, and I went, "Don't send me anymore. I don't want any more. I don't want to know what you've written before, because that's just going to hurt me. I want to write these." I get it. I could immediately see what I could do with these characters. And so Karnak is Karnak the Shatterer, and what he does is he gets like a Wizard Fan Award, right? And then he presses the base of it, and it blows up, which is what I did. I did a little Karnak on it, and so he can see the flaw, the place where it's most vulnerable in anything. And so what I wrote was that he was the advisor to the king, and he could see the flaws in inhuman society. And what I think was very funny was that that fans went, "Wow, Paul Jenkins is a genius. What an amazing use of Karnak." And I was like, "Oh shit, I thought that's what he did."
I guess I should have read some of those Jack Kirby.
Could have read some of it, I suppose, but it allowed me to do something more unique. And so that's what ended up kind of, being. And it's funny because you're looking at the first issue, but it was really issue 2 that exploded. That's the one that just sent this thing sideways.
Well, here's the thing. So we go into what I think is the gut punch of the issue, and the pull through, I guess, is a better word. Yeah. So 21. You return to the thesis. If you would not speak, but you did speak, and it says right here, what would you say? And I think any thinking reader, I'd love to have superpowers, but then I see the price of the superpowers. What would I say? You put me into that in such a way that Like I asked myself, what would I say? And I'm not going to reveal the last page until the last minute because it's a great punch at the end of this, and it makes you go like, I have to read the rest of this, see where they go.
Yeah, I think what we're looking to do there is he's been through this whole thing. He's watching his family argue. He's the dog's getting into it now. Gorgon's like really difficult to work with. I mean, you're talking about like elements of like the Roman Empire. Gorgon just sort of like yelling and carrying on and being himself, and the arguments, and then Triton being really wise and old. My favorite issue of this entire run was the one about Triton. I had wanted to write that from the very beginning. There's this issue that I love. It's issue 9. But essentially what we're doing on that page is just basically going, okay, all right, we'll come back in a circle then. You've seen all of this crazy Inhuman society. So what would you say? If you could just say one thing for the rest of your life, you only had one chance to say one thing. What would you tell all these people, right? They're your subjects, they're your family, your cousins, they're your allies, they're all of these people. So what would you say?
Mike, you're dying for me to turn the page, right?
I'm dying for you to turn the page.
I'm going to turn the page.
You're very slow tonight.
No, I'm letting this is Paul's show. I'm just facilitating. So yeah. Paul, what would you say?
Well, just one thing, and you shout it across the world so everyone could hear. Relax.
Yeah.
Right. That's him. That's everything that I felt was about him, was that he carries himself with this incredible fortitude, and he cannot speak. He literally, one of the premises that we are in the middle pages there. One of the premises is that he has to meditate for an hour before he goes to bed, so he doesn't talk in his sleep.
Paul, you could have written just this issue. They printed the next 11 issues, blank pages, and cashed your paycheck, because that was it. You did it. You did more in 22 pages than most writers would have done an entire series. You should have just said, you don't have to just print nothing.
All compliments aside, I appreciate, thank you. But I think that where I've been just a huge advocate for single issue stories my whole career. People hate them at the publishers. They don't want to do them. They want to do these crossovers. They want to do like 5-issue maxi series, and they want to make sure that they got a trade and all this other kind of thing that I don't know. And so I got into this with Marvel quite often, especially in my Spider-Man run. I wrote all these single issues, and they would say, we need you to do these 5-issue things for trades. And I said, why don't you just get 5 single issues and put them in a trade? Like what is the problem? And in fact, you raised one of the issues up on the screen. There's a Spider-Man issue that I think I've signed more copies of the Spider-Man issue.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is a story that takes place at a baseball game. And it's just the story of Peter Parker going to a baseball game with his uncle. It's the story of a little boy connecting to his father figure because of baseball. And there's a story behind it. And I hope you don't mind if I share it, but it's a meaningful story to me. And I think it's why it comes out in the page. So look at all the business of Marvel. Look at the fact that they need these crossovers and they need this stuff. And they kind of want to do what they're doing. Right. But for me, I was doing single issues and they weren't digging it. Not because they didn't like the single issues, but because they were like, well, okay. But remember, A, I might have beaten my own drum, and B, this is when they're in bankruptcy, so they don't know what to do anyway. And I've come in on Hulk, and the sales have gone up. And I've come in on Spider-Man 6 or 7 months before Straczynski came in, and the sales have gone up. Like, we were the little quiet revolution with our single issue stories, right? And so in that, I tell you where that issue came from. I went over to Great Britain, and I had to go see my grandfather, Bill. And he was in an old people's home in the middle of central Wales. And the challenge of living in America and going to see my family before they pass away is that I have to go and see them before they're gone, right? So I have to go visit, and I have to say goodbye, and then I have to get on a plane, and we both know that I'll never see them again, right? That's a challenging one. I had to do that with my dad a few years ago. I had to do it with my grandfather. I've had to do it many times. So I go over to see my granddad, and it just so happened that it was on the day of the FA Cup final, the big football game, and his team, Chelsea, were playing. And we're in the middle of an old people's home. And there are people with dementia. There's an old lady sitting by the window waiting for someone to show up, talking to herself because she has dementia. No one showed up. And as I'm sitting in there, I'm talking to Grandad, and I'm like, Grandad, is there anything I can do? And he's like, no, boy, I'm finished. I don't mind. I've had enough. And I said, do you want to watch the FA Cup final? No, I'm not that bothered. It's okay. I'm not in. And I'm like, wow, he doesn't even want to watch Chelsea. He's closing down, and he would fall asleep, and then he would wake up again. So he would drift off, and then he would just come again. I'll say, Grandad, I'm still here. And so he was closing his body down. Well, in the middle of it, I said, hey, Grandad, do you remember those old wartime songs that you used to sing to me? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you remember? And I started singing, my old man said, follow the... And so he starts singing with me because it's ingrained in his brain, that song. But what was interesting is like a little creepy moment. And I look around and every one of the old people is singing with us. They're all singing. The old lady by the window who had dementia was singing the words to that song because they all had lived through the Blitz. They'd all lived through the war. They all had the same experience. So I realized, wow, man, I'm so connected to my granddad right now. This is the thing. He used to sit me on his knee when I was a little boy, and he used to sing these songs to me, right? And so we'd sing them together. And I was a little kid, he's 5, warbling this little song, and he'd sing them because he had grown up in London, and that was like where he was from. So I get on the plane, and apparently he had been waiting for me because he and I were very close. He's a curmudgeon, right? But I was sort of like the kid that would always talk with him about his snooker and his pigeons. He waited for my Uncle Michael. They went out. They resolved a couple of things on his last day. And as I took off, he passed away. Now, I didn't know this, but I wrote that issue on the plane. I wrote that whole issue on the plane. And it's all about Peter Parker going to a baseball game with his uncle. What people don't realize is there's one panel in which he's Spider-Man in that entire book, right? And I only had to put it in because they made me put it in because they said it has to have a picture of Spider-Man.
You know,
so it's not about Spider-Man. It's about a little boy and his uncle.
Yeah, I mean, it's about people, Paul, and I think anybody who read it connected to someone in their life who had that experience with. I did. It was a proxy for me and my grandfather. And
people come up to me even now, and I know if they've got that issue with them because they're crying half time. People come up with that issue. You can often tell when you're signing and they got it in both hands. And I'm like, oh, I bet they got Spider-Man 33 or possibly issue 35, which came out a couple of issues later about a little boy with a Spider-Man card. That one is very meaningful to people too. But you're talking about a single issue, right? So all of that resistance I used to get, but people look back on those single issues and they remember them so much more than an event that was happening at some time. And they're like, well, yeah, I vaguely remember what happened in that event.
Yeah. And there's the whole Inhumans and the whole Sentry is terrific. I am hoping before we end this, Paul, to just get some thoughts on how to write for that kind of impact, sure. Because really the people who are listening are people who want to create. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pull back because I want to go back to this Inhumans, and I want to see if you can give a bit of, Mike, I'm going to switch to this. Watch how smooth this is. You won't even see me zooming back. It'll be practically invisible to you. And Paul, it's almost like I
didn't notice the thing. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
I can edit it all together so it looks smooth.
I appreciate you guys. So, Paul, you open, you close, and you bookend this. And all kidding aside, it would have been a great one shot.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you look at those Inhumans, they're almost all single issues, all stacked together. We kept the saga going through. So at one point, the war is kicking off, and there's all this crazy stuff happening, and the whole story is about the dog. It's just the dog walking around Atalan. He wants to go outside and pee. He ends up peeing on one of the tree characters. He wants to get something to eat. He wants to go play with his toy, and in the end, there's this really heartfelt moment because Black Bolt has to stand and look at the destruction of his city and look out of his window, and he can't do anything yet, right? He's completely silent and he can't actually act yet. And the dog comes up to him and he puts his hand on the dog, and then he ends up hugging the dog. And that single issue moved the story overall forward. the next issue was the one I explained to you. It was about Triton, and it was about Triton who witnessed the sinking of the Lusitania in the First World War, and he witnessed man's inhumanity to man, but he also witnessed man's bravery at the same time. And the little boy that he saves believes that he was saved by a mermaid, and has never been able to put it together since. And so single issues and moments, right? What you're showing up on screen there, what you were showing is that I think that you frame them around moments, right? That when I look at this in hindsight, I'm like, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to say, hey, what if you were Black Bolt, right? What if you had this role? I don't know that people had or hadn't done this with Black Bolt or any of the Inhumans. We go through all of them. We understand Karnak at a certain point. We go through Triton, et cetera, et cetera. We certainly go through Medusa. I think Medusa was a really interesting character, and I think she's the person that saves Atalan more immediately than anybody, because she sacrifices so much to do it, right? But I love to frame around a moment, and I knew the moment of the dog story. The dog story was going to end up that he plays and all that, but Black Bolt gives him a hug. The Triton story was going to revolve around this moment that where the little boy is now an old man, and he's sitting on the cliffs looking out to where the Lusitania sank, because it sank off the close of island. And the nurse comes up to him and says, "Oh, Jimmy, you silly old boy, you see a mermaid again, did you?" But he really did, right? And so in these ways, I think we frame our stories around really interesting moments. And if we can do that, it's really important. But I don't just do it arbitrarily. I do a ton of prep. I break down every single book that I work on. I do breakdowns, and then I write the layout, and then I draw the layouts a little bit for myself, and then I write that into, so I know how many panels a page and what the emphasis on each page is. You have to do the work and the prep. But in the end, you're trying to get to the point that will move someone's emotion. It could be comedy, right? One of my favorite books that you brought up, my favorite book to write is Sidekick, right? It cracks me up because it's so politically incorrect. It really doesn't give a toss one way or the other, right? Like, we just make fun. It's stupid superheroes doing stupid stuff. All of them have really bad powers. But comedy still revolves around moments. You have to have this thing that you know you're going to do. And what I see a lot is I'm somewhat disappointed at times in the quality of comics, because you walk in, and I'm not sure that some people are really caring about any of that stuff. It feels like an exercise in getting it out and printing it and doing it again and saying the same things that, what's the worst story in comics? It's Batman meets the Joker. Joker throws a punch. Batman throws a harder punch. Joker falls over and Batman drags him away. That's nothing. That's not a story. That's an event. That's a thing that happened.
Yeah. And that's where, again, when I was emailing you and CarrieAnne, thank you, CarrieAnne, for helping us set this up. I was so impressed by your ability to pace to the moment, to have enough foreshadowing to tell me, but not to spoil it. And you did that in Sentry. You did that in the Peter Parker. You did that in, all three of those issues gut punched me. Yeah, and I love them.
I think pacing is really important. That comes from structure and understanding. If you don't mind, I'm going to, as we sort of I want to show you something that, because I write screenplays, I write a lot of video games like that. So I kind of want to show you a couple of things that that sort of will give you a sense of how these things work. This thing that I'm sharing, first of all, is the beginning of a pacing document for a movie. The movie is called Ragman. So hopefully you guys have it up and you can share that screen. Okay. So this is, obviously I'm not going to give away all of Ragman, but there's stuff. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm breaking down minute by minute, right? I want to know what happens here. I want to know, this is a kind of a horror story. They do this is what's happening. These are notes to myself. And so look at the complexity and especially the length of the entire breakdown of this movie. I do it before I write the screenplay.
Wow.
Right. I've written sample dialogue, and this thing, remember, a screenplay. So let's see how many pages this is. It's probably down to somewhere around 110, whatever. Right. It's that many pages. Right. Okay. So there's that. But what I want to do is to share one more thing, which is to show you, you've got the pacing breakdown, right? So now I'm going to show you what it looks like let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. So this is the actual screenplay, right? The screenplay is an entire page is this amount. So what I described on that breakdown is what you see right here. This is the first scene from this film Ragman that we're doing, right? And this is page 2. This is literally what I already paced out. And I keep to that pacing, right? So essentially, I've already written the movie before I write the movie. And so typing the movie and actually getting it, I'm just channeling the dialogue at that point. I don't have to worry about whether or not I can structure it or where am I going. I already know where I'm going. I already know the moments. I know the most important moment of this movie. I know why I'm writing this movie. I know what it's about thematically. And I've done all that work before I've even done the work. And I think that's the thing that I often kind of explain to people. You've got to know where you're going, right? There's a why. Why did I write that movie, Ragman? Because it's about PTSD. It's about the plight of the common soldier again. It's about how do we, there's a theme to it. There's a specific theme, which is how can we forgive ourselves for something that was never our fault? That's what that's about. And there's also an important moment in it when the main character learns something that we had never seen coming. And when we learn it, we're like, oh my God, it's breaking my heart. Or, oh my God, that's really inspiring or whatever. Like I make sure that my work always contains that stuff. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I can speak for me. You have to have a why. Why does this thing deserve to exist? What's it actually about? And if you don't know, don't start.
You touch on two things. You've had several themes in even the 3 books that we've mentioned, but then also you've written to moments in Ragman. In your beat sheet that you put together. Are you excited about these moments and then just trying to make sure that they have the greatest impact? Talk to us about how you do that.
Okay, so sure, right? So the moments that I'm talking about aren't necessarily even plot twists, right? So in Ragman, obviously I'm not going to. It's a screenplay that it's a film that we have in progress, right? But the idea is, it's a guy who has a really difficult moment that he's experienced in the U.S. military, right? And he can never forgive himself for it. He just, man, I should never have done it like that. My guy's died, and he has PTSD. He has terrible PTSD as an outcome. Now I've got lots of friends with PTSD. I have, the guys that we working on, the special forces guys that came out of Iraq and Afghanistan with PTSD, right? It's part of what we're building out. And so understand, that like, how do we remember we would execute people for the crime of cowardice because they were shell shocked, right? You're talking about the British military. So, they would execute people just for looking at them in a funny way. And so that's such a crime, right? And I wanted to write about that. I wanted to say what it was about. But at a certain point, you've got someone that cannot forgive themselves, right? That's his problem, is he's got survivor's guilt, right? And it wasn't his fault. And my movie is about that moment where we suddenly realize, I see this. I know how he can forgive himself, right? And when we want that for the character. And I was really clever in that screenplay, and that's what I delivered. But there's moments in it. There's just a moment where he confronts the big, bad, scary monster. And what you think would happen is not what happens. And I know that's coming. And so what I'm gearing towards is, do you care? How do I make you care about him? How do I make you feel his loss? How do I make you feel all the things that he's feeling? How do we go through all the other characters? What are their arcs? How does you make a change on page 1, it's going to have a trickle down effect on something that happens on page 72 and 103. You got to be super diligent. And so I prep it all out before I write it, but I know why I'm writing it. I know what those moments are going to be.
And what's amazing is that, you're carrying through the same type of discipline in comics. You noted video games, you noted films. That's why I forget who said it. It might've been Stephen King, Paul. I don't remember, but a writer has a contract with their readers because reading takes so long. And if you're going to read or go to a film, you better be good. Right. And right. Paul, to your credit, you've never broken the contract with me. So if I see your name on it, you hung in there. Thank you for not breaking the contract. And my contract is I'll buy it. I'll take a risk on something that I don't know about.
Yeah, I should mention there's someone that I'd like to mention just in response to that. This last couple of weeks we lost Peter David, right? And I knew Peter. I would see him at conventions all the time. And there's one thing that I would always say about Peter and his work that I think is fair, right? It's a great testament to Peter, right? That I think that if you were paying $3 for his comic, he was trying to give you $6 worth of entertainment, right? That's the contract I think that Peter would always try to live up to with his readers. It's the one that I want to. I've never phoned anything in. I think I've found work that I've done that I looked at and went, man, that didn't land, or I wish I hadn't done it that way. That's okay. There have been other times when I've been surprised. There's a project I did, I kid you not, with Boom. It's called Deathmatch. And I thought the title was awful and they wanted that title. But man, that comic was clever. I've read it back myself and gone, man, I was pretty smart in that book. You didn't see that coming. You have this whole body of work, but what I think my body of work represents and what I would encourage other writers to do is, you're right about that contract. That's a great comment, right? That I'm trying to give you something. I'm not trying to tell you, I'm so interested in the history of wallpaper that you've got to slog through a novel I wrote about the history of wallpaper, right? I've got to give you the pieces that keep you interested. But my job is to make sure that I pay you back for the service you've given to me to pay my wages. And
the trust and you break that contract, an artist, you can see if they get better. You can see Jay improving over the years, or as an early Jay to now. I'm not going to buy a second issue of a writer just to see if they got better.
Right.
Because I don't have the time for that.
Right.
I don't have the money for that. Now, Paul, and we're going to switch the view like this. Paul, we're coming to the end of our time together, and we ask all of our guests this one question, and we'll ask you, what is one piece of advice that you wish you had received earlier in your career?
I think it's the piece of advice that I give out like it's candy now. It's something that I thought of, right? And I didn't get this from anyone, but it's professional advice, right? They say that writers write, and I say this, anyone that knows me already knows the end of this, right? They say writers write. In other words, the act of writing is what makes you a writer, and I cry foul on that. I don't believe that at all. Writers don't write, writers finish. And when I say that to professional writers, they always say, yep, you're dead on. Absolutely.
That's the live studio audience, Paul. They're into this. Now, Paul, we've run out of time. What are the odds of us getting you to come back and continue this conversation? I feel like we just got started.
Yeah, the odds are high. I'd love to. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate the gift, by the way. That was great. Just sort of a check.
Now, Paul, I'm going to pull up.
Those sprats are great.
Now, is sprats a real thing, or did you just make that up, Paul?
Look, hang on a minute. I don't know if you can see it. There you go. Fried sprats.
Oh, jeez. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put Paul's information up here, guys. We want you to say, Mike, and I'll do hold on. Let me do the screen. I'm going to present screen. My goodness. I should have taken a nap before this, Mike.
I should have taken a nap.
I should have taken a nap, but you know what? I didn't. And now I'm going to put my funk music on. That's our play out music, Paul. And we're going to funk out. Don't leave. All right. So, guys, if you like this show, make sure you hit that alert button so that you know when there's other shows, and then you'll know when Paul's back. You can follow Paul. He's active on the X platform. He's got lots of things coming out. Paul, what should we look out for in the next couple months?
There's one interesting thing that's going to happen in the next few months. So I'll do it this way. I haven't done corporate creativity for a while. I haven't worked for the corporations, the big ones, for a while because I don't have to. But that's about to change. So you'll see it when you see it. And I think people will be excited that I'm doing it. So major spoiler alert. Plus, you got an exclusive on the show. Well done. Other than that, we're building out. I build out across new media. My company is Meta Studios, META, right? So we were Meta Studios in 2014, way before Zuckerberg tried to appropriate our name. And
copy you.
META is an acronym. It stands for Media, Education, Technology, and Advancement. Right? Media is what I do. Education is something I care very deeply about. Technology is what sets us apart. And advancement is about advancing creators. I've been doing that since I worked with Ninja Turtles. I've been doing it since Tundra, right? I care about moving creators forward. So technology is part of it. And I work a lot. And this is interesting. Like, this is the eye roll that you guys are about to give me. If I say AI, you go, ugh. And if I say NFTs, you go, oh my God, this is awful. But here's the thing. NFTs are fundamentally a technology, right? The thing you shouldn't be annoyed with NFTs. You should be annoyed with crypto bros. They're the ones that messed it up, right? NFTs are a fundamentally useful technology that is being used by all the major corporations that you can name anyway. It's just all about, it's all about blockchain technology and stuff like that. Same with AI, right? I don't know if I have an unpopular opinion, but here's what I think. AI cannot do what I can do. It cannot write the way that I write, and it never will, because it's only predictive analysis. It's not even artificial intelligence, and it never will be. It's not intelligence. It's predictive analysis of what someone might do or something that might happen. Now, what should you be upset with in AI? We should be upset with people stealing from artists and creators. You should be upset with those people, not with AI, because AI is just like, if someone attacks you with a hammer, you do not blame the hammer. You blame the person who attacked you. So don't blame AI. Don't blame NFTs. Those are really interesting technologies that we can do lots of types of storytelling with. We can use them as assist. But if you're going to use AI, it's not necessarily a creative thing. It's that it has to be curated by human beings like myself to even be effective, right? So I love the idea that things can be done with AI technologies or with NFTs or blockchain technologies. I don't like the idea of stealing from people. And so, we don't have to do any of that. You never even had to do that. That's just what corporate people did. They stole from creators, right? But it never had to happen. So I'm building out a lot of that stuff right now, doing a lot of game design, doing a lot of new projects like that with Meta Studios. And you guys will find them all out when they come out.
All right, I'm going to put my funk music on again, Mike. Now, Paul, I doubt we'll have anything to talk about the next time you come on, but maybe we'll bring you on anyway. We loved having you on. Everybody, the comments were flying. Thank you so much for making time, Paul. We really appreciate it. Guys, we'll see you guys in and he's eating the
rats,
the weird creepy stuff, and I'm gonna have a lollipop just to celebrate. Good night, guys. We'll see you guys next Tuesday, same time.